All right, right here.
I feel like we could use a whole lecture on the revision process.
Uh-huh. Did I not talk to you guys about revision?
You talked about how you don't like it.
I talked about how I don't like it. Let's do a few things on revision then. This is a tough one because revision seems to be even more individual to the various writers than other things in writing, and other things in writing are still pretty individual. And I've also mentioned that I really became a good writer when I learned how to revise with my process. And it felt like this was not something I could learn well until I'd written a number of books. So I had a sense for what had worked in some books and what hadn't worked in other books. So then when I had a sense that something wasn't working, I could try to figure out how to push it toward what was working. So a lot of this came by instinct and experience. And now after the fact, I'm trying to figure out how to explain what I learned to do. The problem is everyone is so different. Particularly on that initial spectrum we talked about in class, multi-drafters and one-drafters or discovery writers and architects, they both seem to approach it very differently. My process is this. I write the book straight through without revising. I change things mid-stride if they need to be changed. I add characters knowing I'll need to go back in and add foreshadowing or add that character into early chapters. I will cut characters. You can see me doing this if you're really interested in Warbreaker, which I posted drafts. I posted chapters as I wrote them. And you can see me just dropping characters out and saying, this character's not in the book anymore. And you can see me adding in themes and whatnot. And you can see me get to the ending of Warbreaker and say, wow, this ending that I was planning is like 80% there, but the 20% miss is actually a pretty glaring miss. I need to do some revising to foreshadow something new to bring in as an element to the end. You see that happening as I go. So I'm taking notes as I write in a separate document of things I've changed. In chapter so-and-so, I added this character. In chapter so-and-so, I tweaked this character's personality in these ways, and I felt it worked. Notes to myself. I'm going to have to really want to look at chapter 7. I felt that, that day when I was writing, I wasn't feeling that it was just awesome. And so in the revision, I should look at that again and see if I was just having an off day or if it really is awful or things like that. I'll do all of this stuff, keeping notes to myself. Often, really, I'll put in 3 stars and stick it at the top of the chapter after I finish it. And then I can collect those afterward. So I finished that completely through. I don't stop writing that first draft. It's very important for me, I've found. There are times when I've stopped because another project has come my way or something like that. And for me, getting back into it is usually disastrous. It takes lots of time and work, and the first things I do if I've been away from something for too long are just terrible. And one of the number one killers of projects for me is too big a gap between in the middle of a book. And I've learned that about myself. That is because I think of the way that I approach things. If I don't know where the characters are, if I'm not really into who they are and what they're doing, I'm not going to be able to keep pushing forward even though I have an outline because the feel will be off for me. And so usually if I stop a book, I have to go start from beginning and read through it and do a heavy draft, which I normally don't like to do, and then pick it up. So I don't stop. That is 1.0. 1.0 is straight through. Now, 2.0 is I go back to the beginning of the book just after I finish it. While everything's still fresh, where the characters ended up is still very clear to me. And I start on page 1 and I read through it, fixing all those things that I've taken notes for myself to fix. All the major continuity problems and things like this that I noticed as I was writing it. So this is basically continuity. Everything I knew that needed to be done. 3.0 for me is my first polish. And I do this generally at that point. I will have the 2.0 and I will sit it aside and let it sit for a little while. This isn't a huge gap always. This may just be a couple of weeks. It may be a couple of months. Sometimes it's much longer than that. This can be a big gap for me. It doesn't matter if it's a very long one. I'll be okay on the 2.0 but to 3.0. When I sit down to do 3.0, my goal is cut 15% line by line. Just looking for too many to-be verbs, passive voice, repetition. What I've told you we do, where we'll often, a lot of us writers will explain something and then show it right after, or we'll in someone's head talk about something and then in dialogue convey the same thing. We do this a lot. It's very natural as a writer. I cut that stuff out. I try to trim. I look for excess world building that I've just been trying to figure out for myself, or excess character where I've been writing my way into a character, and I shrink, condense, clean up. I also look to make more powerful descriptions. Again, usually by cutting and looking for more concrete language and things like this. All of the stuff that they talk about in most of your English classes, your other writing classes where they talk about prose, this is when I do it, is the 3.0 draft. 3.0 draft is then usually where I will send it, so little gap, and then here it goes to alphas. And that's usually a fairly large gap, depending on the book, if I can get it. I don't get this all the time lately because of how tight deadlines are. But in a perfect world, this goes to alpha readers. That is, for me, alphas are agent, editor, writing group, wife. And so I'll start workshopping it in my writing group chapter by chapter. I'll have my agent, my editor read it, and I'll get all these comments back. 6 months is what I'm really looking for, the 6-month gap or so. A lot of people when they talk about revision, talk about how important it is to get some distance from the project. And I find that for almost all of us, this is very, very true. Distance from the project between an early draft and your next draft is going to be wonderful for you in most cases, because what it'll do is you've gotten the book out of your system. It'll let you be a little less paternal or maternal toward this project. You will be able to come back to it and be able to see it more as somebody, you'll never be able to escape your own biases, but more as somebody who's approaching a book fresh without as many of your preconceptions. You'll be able to kill your darlings, in other words. Kill your darlings mean the scenes and chapters that you love so much that you think you're beautiful, but which are not actually contributing to the story and maybe taking away from the story. You'll have a much easier time doing this if you've had a break. I usually, to new writers, suggest, and this is what I did, is write a new book. If you're looking to do this professionally, 2 books a year is a good goal for you. Therefore, you can do a 6-month break. Really, you're not going to be getting 2 books a year, because what you're going to be doing is you're going to be spending, even if you write quickly like I did, you'll be spending 6 to 8 months writing a book. And then you'll still have to be spending another 3 months or 4 months total revision time on that same book. So really, you're producing a book in a year. But what you do is you take off that 6 months or 8 months to write a quick first draft on the next one. And then you can come back to this one and do your draft. And you can do a 4.0. This is if you're using my style, by the way. You don't have to. 4.0 is incorporating other people's, incorporating alphas. I don't incorporate everything. As I've said, I take 1 in 3 comments usually. But that 6 months really allows me to dig into high-level stuff again in ways I couldn't. Like sometimes in the 3.0 polish, I'll be making notes to myself. And all during these 6 months, I'll be making notes to myself of sometimes fundamental changes that need to be made. In the Mistborn series, in Mistborn 2, this was some of the stuff I talked in the annotations where I had to actually move where the climactic last scene happened. from up in the mountains back to the city in Luthadel, and this required an extensive rewrite of 10, 12 chapters. In Way of Kings, this was adding in Adolin, Dalinar's son, as a viewpoint character to split off half of what had been Dalinar's character. In this book, I had a character, I've told you guys this before, right? I had a character who is seeing these visions, and in the original draft, he really worried that he was mad. And because of this kind of internal turmoil, am I going crazy, and things like this, he actually came off very wishy-washy as a character. Particularly for a first book, introducing someone I wanted to be presented as a very strong character, his psychosis and my mad was very hindering, and I didn't know what to do with that until I decided to split it off and give that conflict to his son, which kept saying, "My dad's mad. My father that I love is going crazy," where I could have Dalinar say, "No, something important is happening. This is, I've got to see this through. I don't know what's happening to me, but I have to trust it." And therefore, you end up with two stronger characters. A son who cares deeply for his father, is conflicted by what's happening with his father, but is still very strong in his opinion that my dad's going crazy. And you have his dad who's saying, "No, this is important. These visions, whatever is happening, is something I need to see through." We have conflict between the two of them. We have characters who really like each other, but who are butting heads a lot, and they're both stronger characters because of it. This is not a change I could have made without the time off and seeing the perspective of the writing group members and getting their read where they were saying these things about Dalinar that I'd worried that readers would say. Sometimes you worry about things that don't actually turn out to be a legitimate worry, and sometimes they're just really legit worries, and this one was. And so that was an important thing. 4.0 is usually the hardest revision for me. This is the tough one. This is where I am in Memory of Light right now. This is where fundamental changes to a book often need to be made, and it's actually harder for me to do a 4.0 than to write a new 1.0. And this is what stopped me for years in my writing process, was not being able to do this one. And it's not just the alpha reader things, it's knowing which fundamental things are broken and how to fix fundamental things that was difficult for me to figure out. It's almost always character related for me, because I explore my characters, and you end up with something like Dalinar, which I talked about, or Sazed in Book 3 of Mistborn, where the characters, something's going wrong with them, and I'm not sure how to fix it. So 4.0 is that one. Then I will usually do another polish. And where I'm basically doing this, but my focus is less on cutting now because I've got it cut down. I'll still do a little bit, but my focus on the second polish is just really cleaning up the language and the dialogue and the viewpoints, making sure the viewpoints are strong, that we always know whose viewpoint we're in and things like this. And then I give it to betas. And these are my reader response things. These are my some of the very close fans and fandom that I trust, or friends that aren't in my writing group and things like this. I give it to betas. I get their feedback. At this point, this one is a shorter thing, but then I'll do a 6.0, which is often, I've sent this one back to my editor, and my editor's gotten me back another full set of comments. I will do a 6.0 then, where I incorporate my editor's response to my comments, beta reader comments, any last things I think I need to fix. And then at that point, most of the revision is done. Um, 7.0 and 8.0 are the copy edit and the proofreads, which are done in conjunction with my publisher. And so those are both polishes.